Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Raising Dion Season 2, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have Brayden finding Pat and confronting him all inside of his head, though. So it is interesting because he's like, oh, do you remember me? Because I remember you. And he was like, Pat's like, I don't know who you're. Yeah, you killed my dad. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. But he was like, that wasn't me. And that ends up being a thing that constantly throughout the episode, Pat's still trying to play like, oh, it wasn't me. It's like, no, he wants to sometimes like admit responsibility, but other cases he wants to pass the buck to be like, yeah, I'm just as much of a victim in all of this because my best friend died. I lost a person I cared about. I died. Like, no one's asking about how hard all of this has been for me because, you know, it's still a part of him. Like, just like Nicole said, those aspects of like, right, like I deserve, like he can recognize it sometimes, but other at times it seems like he's oblivious to a lot of that stuff. That it's just like, right, that you're in a position where you should be apologizing all the time. He's almost to that point where he's almost like, God, I've apologized enough. It's like, no. You don't get to just apologize a few times. It doesn't make up for all the devastation because it's not only people that died because of you. It is the people that were severely affected. You want to talk about you being a victim. Brayden's a victim because of you. It's like if it wasn't for you, the crooked energy wouldn't be where it is right now. You know, it wouldn't be feeding off of Brayden. Dion would still have his dad. Charlotte would still be alive. So many of those people wouldn't have been killed because you were trying to help yourself. That his selfishness can get the best of him. Even when he's trying to be selfless, it is still you being selfish. Because even to the point, Brayden's like, no, I can see inside your head that you want it back. He's like, no, I don't. It ruined my life. Whether he realizes it or not, there's some part of him that misses it. Because he even referenced it like a couple episodes back. He's like, being the crooked man, he like with all that power, he felt like a god. It's like, yeah, that doesn't just go away. Like there's some part of you that's like, said it yourself, that believes you deserved everything and this is your opportunity to have it all. And you have this power and like that's been my thing of like, I'm just not 100% sure Pat's doing this all for the right reason. Maybe on some level he's convincing himself he's doing it for the right reason, but maybe on some aspect of like the little bit of the crooked energy that's in him still like has a twinge of like control over him and is kind of giving into those selfish desires and want to be powerful, wanting to have everything he didn't have before. So, but once again too, like Pat tried to be like, it wasn't me, but like Brayden's like, it was you. But it's almost like Brayden's completely ignoring the fact is that the crooked man was a part of it. But I think that's what the crooked man's trying to say. Like, no, that wasn't me. He had that power and he did that all on his own, which the crooked man, once again, is that delineation between whether the crooked energy has always been this sentient thing that just happened to latch onto Pat, or is it like it there because they present it as a means of it is all the negative stuff in Pat personified now. It is free, it's his own. All the terrible stuff inside of him now has a free will of its own. It's kind of what it is. But like sometimes you're wondering, like, was there always something alive to begin with within the crooked man and not just the bad parts of Pat, that there was something else? But it seems like they're delineating it as just purely like, no, it is just all the bad in Pat. So Brayden tells him like, right, you tell anyone about me, I'm going to come back after you. So Pat doesn't say anything. So, which, once again, is kind of that selfishness of you should be putting other people first and foremost, because if you had warned them about Brayden, they would have been more on the lookout for him. Nicole could have warned Dion and all this and that, but because you kept quiet, that's a big issue. That's why he was able to kind of run rampant and do what he's doing this episode, because he's going on the offensive this episode, because he's going after Dion. He's taking control of birds and he's using them to kind of, like when using all those birds, I don't know, crows, ravens, whatever the case may be, it very much makes me think of like Itachi from Naruto, just because of the whole like anytime he was using the genjutsu or a substitution, it would always be crows. I always thought that was like the dopest substitution like method, because he also uses it in his like I said, just all his genjutsus anyway, and it's very befitting considering like what does Brayden do? He makes you see things that aren't there. So there's a very through line of like you can definitely make direct parallels to Itachi. I do like that, obviously, like, all this is going on, there's the whole thing with Esperanza and Kwame, like, she's not performing at her best because she's nervous, because all the people she cares about aren't going to be there. Obviously, Dion's not there to support her. Her dad's not going to be there to see her performance. I love that Jonathan's like, yeah, I got the pyrokinetics up. It's going to be flames in his body. He's like, no. The carpet seems like it's way over. He's like, no, we're not going to do it here. Obviously, when the school opens up, it's going to be a big thing. And she's like, yeah, but still, like, there's a fire code. He's like, I don't care. Get it done. Accept it. Authorize, like, all this stuff about Jonathan's pyro stuff. So I also love that he's like talking about like the character that Esperanza is supposed to be playing. It's like, oh, she's so talented and everyone just is so jealous of her. They're trying to put her down. And just like the way he's talking about it, you're like, oh, you're talking about yourself, aren't you? You're like, you empathize with this character because you're like, oh my God, I'm so talented and everyone wants to drag me down. It feels like that's what, because even Esperanza was like, help me. Because she's trying to play the role. She's like, oh, I'm so great. I'm so amazing. But she's not really feeling it. And she's kind of like, she's super self-conscious and doesn't think she has it within herself to do it. But I love what Dion said to her, though. It's like, right, when you said you knew for a long time I had superpowers, well, I know this about you, that you got this. I've known for a long time. So if you can't get your dad to come, like, maybe you can get someone else to come. And it's like, yeah, Mr. Gary, which is heartbreaking because we know Mr. Gary's current circumstances, which I don't think that was him. Because Nicole said the monster that attacked her was bigger, so we know that was Mr. Gary. The one that died this episode, you know, jumping around a little bit, that monster, I think that had to be the guy who was spreading it first and foremost at the end of last episode. The guy that Kat was seeing as a patient, I think it was that dude in particular. So, but on the Bayona front, they ended up learning a lot of really interesting things. Obviously, Pat's continuing his theory of like, cool, like if I could separate the P, because apparently powered people have a triple helix when it comes to their DNA, and it's like, cool, if I could unravel this, then I'll be able to use this as a means of potentially finding a cure. And I love like the conversations between Kat and Pat. Like I said, like him trying to like play the victim, and she's like, no, don't get it twisted. You're a bad guy. Maybe you should shut up and listen, because he's like, right, I have more experience in this field because, you know, this is a more science thing. This isn't something coming from the perspective of like a medical thing of like, well, I mean, medicine obviously includes science, but it's like, it's not something you would ever study in your medical field. And she recommends metal. Like if you can find someone with like a metallic ability who could potentially like draw it out, like treat it like kind of, because the whole thing is like to kind of treat it like an antibody. It's like if we can get someone to like get them to have a metal ability of sorts, kind of use things to kind of draw things out. And he's like, oh, that could actually work. And she's like, yeah. And before she cuts it off, she's like, ass, and like he's like, oh, that's kind of rude, but it's like she has every right to call you out, because she was like, she had a love-hate relationship with Pat, but it was all within like jest of like, yeah, we're family, we're pretty tight and stuff like that. But to him, for her, like to be like, no, it's pure hate now because like what you did to my sister, you ruined her life and stuff like that. So, and obviously, that's the thing, and that's what complicates things. When Pat is breaking down later on, being like, I can't save you. I'm sorry, I can't fix this. It's like how frustrated he is. You can see Nicole almost look at him like, obviously she's nervous, but also I think you see her being like, wow, maybe you are being sincere about all of this stuff, Pat, because it almost seems like the Pat I knew before, but it's like, well, a lot of the Pat you knew before. Some of the Pat you knew before was just hiding the darker Pat underneath, but then also, like, when he got these powers, when he was going around killing powered people, like, how much of a facade, that lovable goof, like, how much of that was, you know, remembering how much of that was a facade, you have to keep in mind, too, but it does seem like in those moments, you're like, oh, you seem so sincere, but then you're like, I don't know, man, there's also the possibility that this could be a front, like what's it, like whether he realizes it or not, there is some part of him that just wants those powers back. It might just be that Brayden's projecting. Maybe Brayden's just tapping into the crooked energy that's still in him, because that crooked energy represents those parts of himself that he's just like, oh, they're gone. It's like a majority of those feelings and stuff like that is gone, but it's still rooted enough deep in his heart. It's part of who he is, sadly. So it's so intertwined with himself that not just the crooked energy, but that jealousy, that nasty side of himself, that even having most of it gone isn't all of it gone, you know? So just like the crooked energy. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing, but he wasn't able to help at all because he couldn't find a way to separate the peace strand in the first place to even try any attempt at a cure. But it turns out the one at the end of the day who could help is Janelle. Because Simone keeps referring to Janelle's ability as blowing stuff up, but she's like, it's not blowing stuff up. It's just for her, she's like, I just can't quite put into words what it is. It's like, she's like, I can visualize it, but I just can't make it come true. And so her power isn't just like, oh, I blow stuff up. Her power seems like specifically it is, I break stuff down. So she takes the DNA and she like combines it all together, and then she separates it. So it's like, I guess on a molecular level, she doesn't just blow stuff up. She's able to break things down, and if it's more concentrated, more focused, and she like puts her more focus on what she wants the power to do, then it reveals itself of what she can do. She separated the peace strand of the DNA, the power strand, and ended up having what they need to potentially make a cure. And this obviously leads to a really complicated conversation between her and her mom. Because for her mom, she talks about, like, right, like, I was never the science person like your grandfather was. It kind of skipped over me, but you've always been good at this stuff. And, you know, it's like, she's like, yeah, like, Grandpa bought me, like, my first, like, volcano set, like, when I was, like, 4. And it's like, yeah, she's like, I remember cleaning up all those messes when you used baking soda to make a volcano. And so she talked about, like, right, the reason why Janelle was in Iceland is because she went with her grandfather and her grandmother, and like Simone says, like, I'm not good with airplanes, and she was like, the biggest thing I was afraid of is that the moment you go to Iceland, when you come back, you wouldn't be the same, because she already felt like you were already passing me already, and I was right. By the time you came back, you were different. She's pulling away from Simone just because she doesn't... Simone is pulling away from Janelle because she doesn't know how to connect anymore. Because it's like, right, like, it is that thing of, like, you are something special, and what can I contribute to that? Like, yes, I'm a mother, but, like, oh, like, small stuff here and there, like, what can I help you clean up, like, the volcano messes and stuff like that? Like, I can't help you on that front, because you know I just found out apparently like you're some super genius because you were able to, your powers were able to do what you wanted them to do because you already had the know-how to know exactly what you're trying to do. You could visualize it, you just couldn't actually do it, and now she can. And you know, she's like, well, you can help me with boy stuff. And it's like, really? There's so much going on. Your powers, you being a super genius, Nicole being sick. Like, her mom, I think Janelle's kind of going like, oh, my mom's kind of anti, like, me now because, like, oh, I'm But it's like, no, she's just, she doesn't know what to do. It's like, it's the thing of, it's kind of like Nicole's relationship with Dion, how it's like, right, I'm supposed to be the parent protecting you, but you're up here, my 10-year-old son's talking about protecting me with his powers because he is a like, it is that little bit of an insecurity of like, I'm supposed to be the parent, like I'm supposed to know all this, I'm supposed to be guiding you, but how can I guide you in something I'm lost in all of this too? You know, it's like, you're like steps ahead of me, I am falling behind, and I just feel like it's kind of a concern, I think, on some level of like, right, like, I'm scared that, like, maybe it just legitimately, it's just Simone is scared of Janelle, but I think it's also like a deeper level of, I'm scared you'll pass me by, I'm scared that you will leave me in the dust and you won't need me anymore, like, you know, like, you're my baby girl, you always will be. She says she loves her, but it's just, I think it's just, there's a lot of complicated feelings there, and I think, like I said, I think Nicole kind of felt a lot of that towards Dion, and maybe it's still there, and just Simone is just in the middle of processing it. But from Janelle's perspective, it's just like, oh, my mom, like, wants nothing to do with me. It's almost like her mom, it's like my mom wants me to dull my shine. Like, how shining as brightly as, like, instead of my mom embracing that aspect, it's almost like she wants me to dull. Because the whole point wasn't like, right, embrace what makes you special. Because that's something Nicole still struggles with, having Dion, because she wants him to keep it low key. Because it's like, right, the more people who know, the more of an issue. But it's like, right, sometimes you just have to let someone shine. You can't dim their brightness because you're scared of other people's reaction. It's like, it's, you know, and like I said, she came to terms with a lot of that last season, but I think some elements are still there. And I think Simone's kind of going through that of like, right, my daughter always shines. She's shining even brighter now with powers. And I'm like, I'm scared of where my place is going to be in all of this, that she's slowly drifting away from me with all of this. I'm wondering, like, are her grandparents still around? Do they know about all of this? What are their reactions? We didn't really get into any of that, so. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, they try the cure on the infected guy, and he's like, please help me, I got to tell you something. But before he can say anything, he dies. I'm like, this is what I was referencing before, like whether or not this is going to have a happy ending. And I guess the argument is either it's just like, right, this cure isn't everything. Like it fixed a lot of stuff, but before it could reverse anything, it killed him. So the question is it just because he's so far gone that it's impossible to save him? What does that mean about Gary? Because you probably need more than just a strand of DNA to do it. You probably need Dion himself. Dion is probably the only one who can cure him, but obviously curing someone of that size, it's a little different because the person he was curing beforehand was Pat. And so that's what made him sick. So doing something of this nature, he would be curing crooked energy again. So maybe that would still have the effect of, that's the only way to save anyone. It would have to be Dion himself. Like, you can't just replicate it. Like, it's just, there's not enough there. It has to be Dion's full-blown power to cure someone. That might be the missing piece to this puzzle. But yeah, it's like, yeah, it doesn't look good for Mr. Gary, but it also doesn't look good for Nicole. But I think Nicole's in a position of, she isn't fully infected. It's spreading, but she hasn't gone as far as them, so she might not be past the point of no return. It might be still within that realm of possibility to save her. We'll see. But obviously for Nicole, she's shaken by, like, seeing that guy die, because it's like, right, that means my fate is set in stone. Like, maybe there is no curing me. Like, maybe maybe I will die. But it's like, no, like, I need to be here for my son. Like, he's already lost one parent. I can't do that to my son. I don't want to die either, so. You do have Miss Bonnie dropping off Esperanza's, like, letter and ticket because she wants to bring Mr. Gary to see her performance. The thing is, he might come back home because on some level his human brain is still like, no, I need to come back here. And so that might be like his nesting ground, and Miss Bonnie showing up there might get infected. I did like that thing of, she's like, oh, like, we carpool to our salsa lessons, and then Esperanza's looking at her and she's like, what? You think just because we show up here, like, you know, it's that thing of like, right, you don't, when you're a kid in school, you never want to look at your teachers as people. You know, you want to look at them as like, oh, they're just like here to do their job, and they're not regular people, they're not normal people. It's like, yeah, they have lives, they have relationships, they date, they have fun, they have social lives. You know, it's like certain things you just don't want to envision, because like, you don't look at your teachers as humans. Sometimes you just look at them, it's like they're a teacher, like that's a species all on its own. So I thought that was kind of a cute scene between them. But on the flip side of things, you have Dion, Tevin, and Kat out by the cabin, and Tevin's training Dion up. I am curious, because it almost seemed like Tevin has his own issues with the woods. Like, I don't know, it seemed like he was kind of a little uneasy, and I'm wondering, like, because there's little hints to, like, obviously he's talked about his past, about him not being in a good place beforehand, but, you know, like, oh, it's kind of a good thing him and Nicole met now, because he was kind of going through some stuff, which even Kat was asking about. He's like, yeah, I don't have a deal currently, but it makes it seem like, oh, he had one in the past, but... And the way he talks to Dion, it seems like he ran with the wrong crew. He got up to some shenanigans. He got up to some bad stuff. But subsequently, his life has been on... He's done right to put his life back on track, so... I'm curious, like, when he got his life back on track. Was it post finding out he had powers, or was it was he already putting his life back on track before he found out about powers? I'm curious about that, but obviously, like, he's training Dion up. It's just kind of like a little game of tag. But he also teaches Dion the lesson of, like, right, don't let someone knock you off your game. Because he's like, right, you're so focused on my shield and trying to keep away from me, you didn't notice the law behind you when you tripped. It's like, right, you got to stay on your game. You got to stay focused, kind of basically be aware of everything around you. Don't let someone else dictate kind of the flow of the battle, essentially, and push you in the corner and kind of, like, get you off your game. But I do like that Kat's like completely nervous. Like, does no one know what's going on here? Like, this is like a horror movie. Like, why do black people go in the woods? It's like, it's the dumbest thing ever, considering, like, none of us ever seen horror movies. It doesn't end well. I even love, but she's asking all this stuff about, Tevin's deal. And I love that Dion is like, Auntie Kat, I know what you're talking about. And she's like, what? He's like, but I thought you were gay. And I love that he's like, hey, he's a very knowledgeable kid, because he understands. He's like, no, I understand that I understand that it's, sexuality is on a spectrum. And I was like, hey, look at you. Because she's like, yeah, but I'm not asking for me. Do notice that she didn't go like, yeah, I'm asking for your mom. It's like, that's a complicated conversation. Like, oh yeah, he's tight with Tevin, but then, like, obviously that's a conversation that hasn't been broached with Dion yet about like, cool, but especially because he's still holding out hope. Like, he knows his dad's out there somewhere, his energy. But his mom did say, like, right, he is all around us. He is with us. But if he could come back like Pat did, he would have, you know, way before now. So, but I'm definitely curious to learn more about Tevin. I wonder, will we ever get into the real ins and outs of it, or what we got between conversation-wise between him and Dion is all we'll get. I'm curious. But, because obviously, like, Tevin was initially able to shake off Brayden's, like, control. Like, he's like, oh, you have to kill him. He's a danger. He'll kill all of us. You killing him is the right thing to do. You're like, Jesus, kid. And so, but Tevin talks to him about, like, right, him being off his game. He's worried because it's like, right, my mom, I haven't talked to her about everything because he tried to leave a message for her about Brayden. But he's like, yeah, it's complicated. And he talks about, like, right, my friend, he made me kind of do some bad things, which Dion was like, well, because Tevin was like, yeah, I'm sure your dad made mistakes. But he's like, you didn't know my dad. And you're like, right, your dad said was an amazing guy. The thing is, we as the audience know, and Nicole knows, Mark made mistakes. He wanted to try and protect his family from all that was going on, and so he shouldered a lot of stuff by himself. For one, he left Nicole to figure this out on her own. Like, that wasn't his plan, but him not preparing her for what was coming, that was a mistake. He shouldered all of this on his own. That was another mistake, like, instead of relying on other people. So he did make mistakes, but Tevin at the very least talked about, you know, it's like, right, I won't speak for your dad, I'll speak for myself. I am someone who made mistakes. But basically, you don't have to let your mistakes essentially define you. Because he's like, yeah, but I made a bad choice. He's like, yeah, so make another choice, you know? That one bad choice doesn't have to define you. It's what you do afterwards. Like, you know, are you going to continue to make bad choices, or are you going to try and make better and good ones going forward, you know? So, but sadly, Brayden finally starts getting inside of, Tevin's head and pushes him, but luckily Tevin was able to kind of fight back a little bit. I think it's because luckily they have powers, so they're able to fight it back a little bit. He made it sound like he couldn't control or push people with powers, which maybe that was him lying to Dion, but it might also because, well, Dion has like psychic powers too because he has telekinesis and stuff. Like, maybe because of, like, the fortitude of his powers and everything. And maybe that's why the Crooked Man couldn't necessarily get him in his weakened state. Just like Brayden can't push him. He can get inside of Dion's head, but he can't push him. But I guess he can push powered people. Maybe he's just, his powers have advanced now that he can. But it is like, they still, because they have their powers, they can push back a little bit. So Tevin was just able to tell Dion to run. And like I was referencing earlier with the Itachi thing, I think most of those birds were fake. They were just to throw Dion off his game, and sadly Brayden finds his way, and you know, it's like, right, because I was about to say, like, oh yeah, you want to act all tough, but you're getting Tevin to do it. I did like that the birds took on the form of the Crooked Man as it was, like, trying to, like, eat Dion in that moment. But like I said, it was all, like, illusion, making Dion see stuff that wasn't there, and Brayden has him now, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where this goes next episode. I'm assuming the information is going to come out about Pat not telling anyone about the truth about Brayden, and like, oh, he has a crooked energy, that you knew that, you sat on that information, and now Dion's in trouble because of you. Yeah, you took one step forward, you're about to take 2 steps back because of all of this. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens next. I was actually kind of surprised because I was assuming he was going to try and attack Dion's friends while Dion was away, but that could be the next step. Like, oh, he can't deal with Dion, so it's like, right, I'm going to do the supervillain thing and hurt everyone around you to get you, to draw you in. So Jonathan, Esperanza, well, everyone at school potentially. So, you know, right, you know, because that's the problem of being the good guy. You care too much, you know, so that's going to be an issue. The thing is, will he be able to save Brayden, or will Brayden suffer the same fate? I don't think that he'll suffer the same fate. I think he will get saved. I am curious, will this be an end result where it's like, not only will you take the crooked energy from him, will he end up losing his powers, or will he eventually go back to being like, I'm sorry, I got so consumed by it, just like Pat was telling him, like, don't let it feed on the negative energies and stuff inside of you. You don't want that. So we'll see where the next episode takes us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.